My name's John. This is Jeremy. We're both from FMA. This morning we have the distinct pleasure of introducing today's guest speaker, Mark Neville.
Mark started at State Farm in 1989 and worked his way up to HR. Mark is a chartered financial consultant and a chartered life underwriter. In his free time, he enjoys kayaking and flying fishing.
And afterwards, there'll be a reception downstairs in the student lounge from 10 or from 11 to 12, which you can ask questions. Just enjoy some free nachos. So, enjoy. Mark.
Well, thank you for the introduction. I'm Mark Neville. I'm very excited to be here. I'm excited because I'm going to share with you some things that I think are unusual, some things I think will benefit you in the future. I want to thank Dr. McClatchy for allowing me to be here. I'm going to talk to you about self-improvement, self-presentation, specifically in an interview format. Really? Listen, if I were you, honestly, if I were you, I'd be, oh my God, I'm stuck in this room. He's drying his toast. He's the classic insurance guy. He's short, he's bald. Can I set off the fire alarm telepathically so he will escape? Honestly, that's how I would think if I were sitting in the audience and someone started off that way. That dry. I'm excited to be here. Really. We're going to use this, or I'm going to use this, throughout my presentation today. I got an hour and 10 minutes or so with you. And I'm going to use every bit of it. But I want to tell you what you did in that first 30 seconds. What you did is you evaluated me. You watched everything I did. And you read my nonverbals. I don't expect you to be trained from a human resources perspective, but you're humans and you're reading. You're very intuitive when it comes to nonverbals, nonverbal communication. And as I said, if I were you, I'd be like, kidding. I can't escape. McClatchy's going to see me. That's what I would think. It's so important for you to realize how you're being interpreted. And we're going to specifically talk about how you're being read in an interview situation. It's my understanding this audience is made up greatly of juniors and seniors, most of you Monfort College business students. Is that true? Okay. You're going to be interviewing not once, not twice. Throughout your career, you're going to interview 10, 20 times. These are skills that I'm going to impart upon you today that you'll use. These are valuable skills, and it's going to be an interesting ride, hopefully, for you, because I'm going to take it from a perspective that you've probably never heard before. I'm not going to talk to you today about some of the things you've probably already heard about interview. Don't chew gum, don't swear during the interview. You know, I'm going to talk to you about it from a perspective that's very unique. It's from the human resources perspective. What do we really look for? What really happens after you leave that exit? What do we talk about? I've been with State Farm for 22 years. Half my tenure was in HR. And I started my career at State Farm in California, and I transitioned to an HR role in California. The Los Angeles area was my area to recruit. And Los Angeles is a completely different animal, as you can imagine. And I want you to picture this. It's going to be hard for you because we're in an economic time that I hope we never see again. A very tough economic time. I don't have to tell you, you guys are getting ready to graduate. I would imagine you're nervous about the job market. I would be. It's a tough environment out there. All the more reason why you need to listen today, because you need to be ahead of the next person. You need to set yourself apart. But I'm going to take you back. It's mid to late 90s, and I'm in Los Angeles, and I'm a recruiter for a large insurance company. Now, in a recruiting fair, there are booths. You've probably been to those. You know, every company has their large booth set up, right? And I had a State Farm booth, and we had a nice little draped tablecloth with our very recognizable red and white logo on it. And to my right is Google. It wasn't nearly as recognizable as it is today. And the person has dogs with them, because you can bring your dogs to work at Google, right? And on this side was the FBI. And I must say, I've come to the realization that people, when they're growing up, don't dream of this. Oh, I wish I could be an insurance person. If only I could be an insurance person. And they dress up as little insurance guys, right? No, they don't. They dress up as cops, firemen, nurses, much sexier type careers. Very unusual for someone to say, I just can't wait to be an insurance person. Just my lifelong aspiration. It doesn't happen, and I know that. And in the late 90s, it was an absolute war for talent. And it's going to happen again. We'll talk about that. But at the time, it was a frenzy of activity, especially in the LA area. This is the .com. Every company was offering tremendous signing bonuses, and I would be sitting behind my booth, and at the time we were in business dress, meaning I had to wear a tie and a jacket, and at the time I had a closet full of white shirts. For me, it was very easy because I didn't have to go, what color today? It was the same uniform every day. So I'm sitting behind my desk with my uniform, the white shirt, tie, and I couldn't get people to come near me, right? The FBI is sexy. FBI, right? No one really cares about a State Farm badge. And Google had a line of people because the dogs were cute. And people wanted to bring their dogs to work. And no, those are things that were inescapable at an insurance company. And I would get questions such as, do you have to wear that to work? And I'd be like, yeah. And they'd turn around and be like, oh, don't come back. I couldn't even, it was so hard to recruit at that time. Unbelievable. People had their choice of employment. Now, today, now it's completely opposite. We can recruit people of such high caliber because the economy has driven that. Before I really get into my meat and potatoes, I want you to know that you have invested a minimum of 4 years here. And I would say to you that that's the best investment you've ever made and will ever make, is that in your education. It will pay you dividends, no question. That may be hard to see today. And your experiences in the last 2 years may not show you that this is going to pay dividends, but I'll assure you it will. So you've done the right things. You're making yourself competitive on paper. Now I want to make you competitive in an interview process. I talk in stories because I think people remember stories. And you'll hear me go through a number of different stories, some humorous, some not so humorous, but they're all designed to reinforce the value of self-presentation and how to interview. And I'm hoping some of these will stick with you because they're goofy. Okay. After about 7 years in human resources, I was given an opportunity to go down to Tucson, Arizona to train with this person. It's an ironic name. His name is Dr. Sam Smiley. And he's a self-improvement coach. Yeah, unusual, isn't it, Smiley? And Smiley is used by a lot of large organizations to prep executive-level individuals for that interview. He's phenomenal. He's renowned. And I was given this opportunity by State Farm to spend 2 days with him. And I must say, at that time, I had 7 years in. I had interviewed thousands of people. Thousands of people. I felt, I'll go, but you're not going to be able to teach me much. Because I've been there. I know it. So I flew down to Tucson and checked into my hotel. And I called Dr. Smiley, said, I'm in town. And he said, great. will you meet me tonight at this restaurant? And I wasn't familiar with Tucson. He gave me directions to it. I'm very cheap and wouldn't normally pick a restaurant of this caliber. This was a nice restaurant, a very nice restaurant. I've never seen Dr. Smiley. I didn't know what he looked like. And I entered the restaurant, and I'm, obviously just kind of looking around. And this older man, honestly looked like he was 100, approached me and introduced himself as Dr. Sam Smiley. And, we sat down, and this was a beautiful restaurant. And we're talking, I'm having a beer, he's having a wine, and I must say he is so enjoyable. You just gotta like him. He's funny, he's witty, and time is just flying by. And then in the middle of dinner, he says to me, Mark, what's our waitress's name? Dr. Smiley, I don't know. And he says, well, watch this. And the waitress comes back over, and he says, oh, Sarah, looks at her right in the eyes, says, Sarah, could I trouble you for some more water? And she says, absolutely. And she walks away. And then Dr. Smiley asked me, Mark, what did you see? And I said, well, I saw Sarah light up like a Christmas tree when you used her name. He says, that's right. That's right. And this is a Sam Smileyism. He says, I have a human connection with Sarah now. All right. But sure enough, he says, I want you to watch the rest of the evening. And sure enough, Sarah would come over to our table, and it was like I wasn't even there. And she'd be like, is there anything else I can get you? Speaking right to Dr. Smiley. Now, Sarah's not coming on to Dr. Smiley because Dr. Smiley's 100 years old. So it wasn't that kind of thing. It was just simply that there was a connection there. Lesson 1. Then he says to me, hey, Mark, why don't you come to my home tomorrow morning and we'll continue with the training. Sure. So I come to his home early in the morning, and the first thing, beautiful home, first thing he says is, sit right there, we're going to do a mock interview. Well, I'm no different than anyone else. It's easy on the HR side. It's not easy being the person being interviewed, right? I mean, no one likes it. No one, myself included. So I was like, sure. And I knew this was going to happen. I'm not stupid. I was in HR for now 7 years. I knew there was going to be some testing of my interview skills. So I came prepared. And I had pulled out my paper, and Dr. Smiley saw it. And I had it there in front of me. And he's very theatrical. He said, what's that? Well, it's my prep, for this, thinking I was going to do a mock. And he takes my paper and does that to it. And I was like, what? Really? And he's like, and this is what I want you to remember. This is a very important point. He's like, Mark, you would not have this interview. You would not have this interview unless you have the skills to do the job. This is not about your ability to flow back information to me. This is about, do I like you? Do I like you? I was resistant to that. Here I am, 7 years, interviewed thousands. Do I like you? Really, that's what it's about? No, I don't know about that. So we go on with the mock. And he says, why don't you start off by telling me a little bit about yourself? As most interviews start off. So I started. Well, I'm Mark Neville. I've been with State Farm for blah, blah, blah. I've been in human resources. I've done it. And he says, very theatrically, starts doing this. Looking under the table. And again, I'm like, what? What are you doing? And he's like, I don't like you. He's very direct too. I don't like you. He says, I liked Mark last night. I really liked Mark last night. And he asked me, did you enjoy it? I was like, yeah, I enjoyed it. He said, so do I. I would have hired you for anything. This Mark, however, I don't like. I wouldn't hire you for anything. And then he asked me, count to 1 to 10, using that voice you just used. 1, 2. He says, hear it? What is that? What is that? Is that the business Mark? Because that's not the Mark I met last night. And this is hard. Right? I'm taking arrows left and right here. But he was right. I had this completely different persona. I had the Mark social, and then I had the business interview. Mark. Completely different. He says, I had no connection with this business Mark. Enjoyed the heck out of the social Mark. Big deal. Then he goes on to share some statistics with me. He says, Mark, 80% of the information that I'm receiving from you is nonverbal. 80%. Whew. What? Of that 80, 60% is the tone of your voice. Again, I didn't buy this hook, line, and sinker. 80% nonverbal. 60% of that tone? I don't know about that. I took a lot of the things that I learned from Dr. Smiley with me back to work. And I was very interested when I go through interviews, and I'd generally be on a panel. And a lot of times it was for very high-level positions within our organization. And when the candidate would leave, I couldn't wait to ask my panel members, what do you think? And I was, for some reason, even though I interviewed, I was expecting to hear, oh boy, he really had a good answer for how he was a leader. Nope. I heard, oh, I really like him. Did you see how he smiled? His people will really like him. People will like working for him. Like. I kept hearing the L word. Executives like. None of this stuff about all the competencies and all the skill sets they bring. No. Because Smiley was right. We wouldn't have interviewed them unless they had the skills to do the job. We wouldn't have interviewed. They have the skills. You won't get an interview unless you have the skills to do the job. You're the same thing. You have the skills. You're acquiring the skills here. They're going to see your resume, and they're going to say, all right, let's go ahead and interview this person. You have the skills. Do they like you? I couldn't believe it. Interview after interview, the same thing. And then I had an interview that I recall very vividly. It was an interview, again, a very high-level position within our organization. And the reason it sticks on my head, we interviewed probably 5 people for one position, which is a common ratio. And the first 4 were extremely technical. They were like the business market. They sat erect and didn't smile. I don't even know if they had teeth. And they gave wonderful, deep answers. How they saved the corporation billions of dollars by putting in efficiency gains and blah, 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 blah. Phenomenal. The last person we interviewed for the position missed her flight and was just all this disrupted from missing her flight. Comes in and she says, oh my gosh, I probably look like I slept in my clothes, because I did. And she was funny and smiled, and we enjoyed her. You're like, oh, I can totally understand missing a flight, you're stressed, you got this interview, and she was just open and sharing. We had a human connection with her. Because she was real and open. Her interview questions, her answers were nowhere near the depth of these other 4. No, not even on the same caliber. Nowhere near it. Guess who got hired? Because the executive said, I like her. I like her. The reason that one stuck in my head is because it was just so polar, the differences. Extreme examples these people were able to give. Deep, deep, deep. And it came down to this likability factor. Because reality is, they could all do the job. We wouldn't have interviewed them if they couldn't all do the job, if they didn't have the baseline skills. We wouldn't have even interviewed them. It came down to the fact of that likability. I have told you, I've interviewed thousands. I've never once written, candidate was overly passionate and enthusiastic for position. Never wrote that. I've never seen that. I've seen appropriately passionate. I've seen thousands, though, of doornails. The people they're just paralyzed and they can't connect. They may say, like my introduction, I'm excited to be here. Really? Remember, tone. My tone if it doesn't show excitement, you may hear excitement, but you're like, no, he's not. No, he's not. Smiley also said, which I had a hard time initially, is the decisions made very quickly. Decision in the interview process is made very, very quickly. How quickly? 3 minutes? He thinks that's the outside. And again, resistant. All this interview, I can't believe that. How can that be? I'm thinking to myself, no way. If it's a 40-minute interview, I'd give him the full 40 minutes. And I do give him the full 40. However, I made the decision very quickly. And you don't realize that, even from a human resource perspective, until someone brings that to your attention. So then I started asking people, when did you make the decision? When did you make the decision? And they'd never heard that question before. And then think, well, I liked him immediately. I liked him immediately. So then I started thinking to myself, when am I making the decision on these people? When am I really making the decision, yay or no? When? And it was kind of shocking to me to realize many times I'd go and get people out of the lobby. And I'd say, good morning, I'm Mark Neville. And I'd walk with them. Oh, and it was a walk 50 yards. And I was like, oh, it's cold out there, especially on a bald head. And I'd have some small talk with them, right? And before I got into the interview room, I knew. If I was being honest with myself, I knew. Yes or no. It's that quick. So then I'd have HR reps who I'd say, you know what? You're going to make the decision very quickly. Oh, no, Mark. No, I don't. No? All right. Ask yourself when you're making the decision. Sure enough, they'd come back in, maybe it was weeks later, and say, you know what? You're right. I'm thinking I'm giving them the full time, but the reality is I know very quickly. I know in their introduction. I know in their introduction. You need to understand that. You need to understand how fast that decision is being made on you. You have the skills, coming down to this likability. How can it be that fast? How can it be? I was very resistant to it. And you may think, you go into an interview, and I'm taking interviews from a perspective of a very large, sterile organization. What I mean by that is large organizations need to protect themselves. And usually we use a competency-based interview questions. And I'll explain what that is in a bit. And if there's 7 questions, guess what? You're going to get 7 questions. Even if we know right off the bat, we're not going to hire you. Because we want to be able to say, all the candidates got the same questions. They all got the opportunity to compete equally for this opportunity. You may be thinking, oh, it was awesome. It was a 40-minute interview. It had to go good. No. Nope. And you're going to get the questions. And you'll probably get the time. But it doesn't mean it was a good interview at all. At all. It really is coming down, and I'm spending a lot of time on this, I know, this introduction. because I want you to understand how important this introduction is. When is that decision being made? What occurs? This is from an HR point of view. What occurs after you walk out of that room? And I'm telling you, time after time, it's not, oh, that was just the best answer. She cured cancer in that answer. No. It wasn't coming down to that. It was coming down to real. Did you see the passion and enthusiasm in that person? Passion, enthusiasm. And I don't mean, I'm really excited to be here. No. You need to show it. It needs to be in your tone of your voice. I'll give you some examples. You talk to someone on the phone. You know, like that. Are they in good mood, bad mood, bitter, angry, whatever the heck you know. You don't see them, right? You get no visual nonverbal cues. You're just getting a cue from their tone of their voice. And you're picking up an enormous amount of information, aren't you? You know what I'm talking about. You know very quickly. You may not even know the person, and you're picking up these tremendous cues on the tone of their voice. The interview is the same way. Smiley was absolutely right. This business mark is not going to cut it because you're not going to make a human connection. Smiley talks about a self-reflective voice, and I want to talk to you about that. Self-reflective voice. And I never heard that term until this training. And a self-reflective voice is a voice in the back of your head that says to you, oh boy, this isn't going good. Look at him. He's not even smiling. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Right? I mean, you've heard it before. If you've interviewed before, you're like, oh crap, this is not good. Right? You've been there. It's not good. Smiley asked me about that voice. He said, last night when we had dinner at the nice restaurant, Mark, did you hear a self-reflective voice? And I was like, no, I didn't. And he's like, that's because you and I had a human connection. We had a human connection. And you don't hear the self-reflective voice when you're in this human connection. A conversation. Think about it. You go out with your friends and you have a beer. You don't hear this, oh my, why are you looking at me that way? Right? It just doesn't happen when you're doing that. Because you're just interacting and having a great conversation. In the interview, however, if you're hearing a self-reflective voice, it's your kiss of death. You're in trouble. You're not making a human connection. The good news is you can push out the self-reflective voice. You really can. But you need to be very aware of it. Now, you heard in the introduction, I really enjoy kayaking. And my kayaking that I enjoy is generally on the ocean. I have an open-top kayak, and I just find it tremendously relaxing. It's my happy place, right? And you're just going, you hear the paddle enter the water, and you hear the hull piercing through. It just makes it, it's just a quiet, beautiful, serene time for me. And I must say, if I start off an interview, and as I said, a lot of interviews start off, why don't you just start off and tell me a little bit about yourself? And the person does, oh, okay. Guess what? I'm done. I'm kayaking. I may look like I'm interested and looking like I'm still talking to you, but I'm done. I'm already in that. Because I know I'm not going to hire you. I've got to go through this whole interview, and I will, but I'm done. Honestly, in my head, I'm kayaking. Absolutely checked out. You cannot let that happen. You can't let it happen. It's amazing to me how often that does happen, though. The simplest things. Really? Tell me about yourself and you're stumped? It's unbelievable to me, but it happens time and time again. Let's talk about, in a large company, generally there's a couple of hurdles you need to get over. Human resources has two functions. They hire and they fire. And they both have unique skill sets that are applied to both. The hiring part, and I want you to understand this, the hiring part is generally done by them from a screening perspective. In other words, they kind of are the first barrier for a particular company. If you can get through that HR barrier, then generally you'll get a next interview with the hiring management. Very common scenario. Sometimes HR can direct hire, but a lot of times it's this first hurdle. And an HR rep is evaluated based on their quality of hire. Quality of hire? Yeah. So the HR rep wants to make sure that the person they're recommending is a quality person. Right? Because if you're recommending these people and they're coming, right, and you're like, gee, Mark is putting in these goofballs. What kind of screening is that? He's not saving me, management, any time at all. I want someone who can screen these. I don't want to interview every goofball in the world. Screen them. And they know that. The HR rep knows. Hey, I've got to screen these people because my reputation as an HR professional is on the line. I've got to make sure I screen these individuals. Another aspect of that is how long does this person stay with an organization? That's tracked. That's part of the quality because that means they're getting the right person with the right skills for the job. You can hire someone who's not qualified, who can't seem to get through the training, and then the company terminates them, right? Just not successful. Or you can get someone who's overqualified, who, when given another opportunity, will leave in a heartbeat because the job you hired them for is beneath them. That's true. You can certainly hire someone who's overqualified. You've probably heard the term, like, how can you possibly be overqualified? I want you to understand it. From an HR perspective, it's not good to hire someone overqualified. Our lowest level job at State Farm, we spend $80,000 in their first year. $80,000. And there's a lot that goes into that. There's the recruiting costs, there's their training costs, their workstation costs, their benefits, their salary, what they call duplication. In other words, I've got to pull someone out of production to train them. So all these costs get wrapped up. But it's very expensive. That's our lowest level, $80,000 a year. So you can imagine if I hire the wrong individual and they're gone after a year, I pissed away company money. I didn't do a good quality hire. Now some people are getting it. You can't get 100%. You just can't. But you can get a good percentage of people that stay with the organization who perform at a high level. That's a quality hire. So from an HR perspective, we're looking for that quality hire. We're looking for someone who wants the job. We want someone who wants the job, and you tell me you want the job by that passion and excitement and a smile. That's what I want. Because that tells me non-verbally, I will walk on hot coals for this company because I'm so excited for this opportunity. Yeah, that's what I want. The reality is our jobs, in most jobs out there, are not, it doesn't require, it's not a rocket science. We can train you to do virtually anything with an average intelligence. You're showing me through your bachelor's degree that you have the ability, the learning agility, to learn and retain information. That's why I'm looking at that resume. Yeah, okay, you can do that. So now it's not about that. Now I want that passion, that excitement. I want the human connection. And it needs to be done very early. Otherwise, you don't have a shot. Because guess what? If you come off like a doornail, I'm done. So let's talk about, at the introduction, a little bit more. What do you put in your introduction? Right? You've got to understand there's a lot of questions we can't ask. There's a lot of questions we can't ask. Now again, I'm taking this from a very sterile, large company who's always afraid of being sued. And will make sure they put in every effort to avoid a legitimate lawsuit. And that's what large companies do. They have to protect themselves. So I'm not going to be able to ask you about your age, your race, your gender, your marital status, your sexual orientation, your religious affiliation. There's a ton of questions I just can't ask. It's illegal. Can't ask it. Now you can tell me some information, certainly. But you know what's coming. Hi, I saw your resume, Jane. Why don't you just start off by telling me a little bit about yourself? That is your cue. You're on. This should be smooth, passionate, excited. It's scripted in your head. I don't want it canned. It should be, Mark, I'd love to tell you about myself. Thank you. Smile, great eye contact, warm tone. And you go off and you tell me some information about you. I want some information. I don't want to just, I graduated from Monfort College of Business in 2011, a major in finance, and looking for a job. Crazy as that may sound, see it all the time. We've hired a lot of UNC students. We do, and have. And you would think, oh, boy, it's really tough to be a great interviewer. No, it's not. It's not hard to differentiate yourself. You just need to come across passionate, enthusiastic, say, hey, I'm glad to tell you about myself. And then start telling them, well, and go through it. All right, let me give you an example. I'm Mark Neville. I really don't have any one place I call home. When I grew up, my dad was in the military, and we moved very consistently. I graduated from Long Beach State. I started with State Farm, as you can see, in 1989. I've held various positions. I have 2 wonderful children named Kaylee and Connor. My wife, Maureen, who's a saint, clearly, because she's stuck with me for this long. Right? I'm giving you some information. I enjoy fly fishing. I probably have $1,000 worth of fly fishing equipment now. I've caught 3 fish. Do you get what I'm saying? I'm giving them some information. I want you to hear some of the information I'm giving them. You couldn't ask me if I'm married. You couldn't ask me if I had kids. But not only did I tell them I had kids, I named them. I told you the name of my wife and my children, because that allows me to get a human connection. I told you honestly about my fly fishing experience. Because guess what? They're going to be like, oh my gosh, they made that so complicated, right? And I'm going to get into this dialogue with this person who's interviewing me. A conversation. Not an interview anymore. Get rid of the word interview. It puckers you up. It puckered me up. Right? I just became this stiff board who just had this terrible business voice that completely prevented me from making a connection. Completely prevented it. And my likability factor went into the toilet. Just absolutely plummeted. Because of my inability to make this connection and have this nice warm conversation. It's a conversation. It's a conversation about, do I like you and are you a good fit for this job? Now, I can't obviously guarantee you that you're going to get the next job you interview for. I can't guarantee that. But if you listen and you take some of these things to heart, you will interview much better. Much better. We've spent an enormous amount of time on this introduction, and I'm going to move on for it. But I don't want to move on for it until I understand that you understand how critical that introduction is. How absolutely critical to you getting the thumbs up for this job. You cannot, the rest of this presentation, I'll teach you how to answer some competency-based questions. We'll teach you how to wrap up an interview, but make no mistake about it. The most important part is this introduction. Now, arguably, you're on before you can see anyone. Because many times I'd ask my receptionist, what do you think? Because I want to know how you treated the receptionist. I really do. And sometimes if the person was close, she'd have to say, well, I'll have to talk to you later about it. And I'd be okay. And it's fascinating to me what would occur. Well, Mark, they were on their cell phone waiting for you, and they were using profanity. I don't want that. I don't want that. Or they came in and they're like, really? He's running 5 minutes late? And they gave my receptionist attitude. I don't need that either. You also have to be very careful of your social networking sites. It's a gold mine for HR, but it can do you in, right? I mean, we've had some great fun looking at some of these, these people do bomb hits, and you're like, I'm probably not going to hire you, right? It's just crazy. And so be careful. Companies use it because it's so easy and it's available, and it's the real you. We want to see the real you. So be very cautious of that. Also, I want to, before I move on, is to make sure you understand, I want you to really want the company you want to work for. I don't want you life's too short for you to go to an organization or a job that you don't like. When I'm talking to you about this passion, enthusiasm, excitement, I don't want you to fabricate it. I really don't. I want you to honestly have this passion. You have it. On one hand, the internet can be very dangerous for you, but on another hand, it can be a phenomenal resource for you to look into organizations, to find out about them. Because when you get asked, why State Farm? I get this all the time. I just need a job. Well, what attracted you to State Farm? Well, it was close. Okay. What do you know about State Farm? I know you guys sell insurance. Right? I don't want that. How can you be passionate, enthusiastic, and excited about a company you don't even know anything about? You can't be. So I want you to be very targeted in that. Because I want the answer of, you know what, Mark? The reason I want this organization is I understand its values. This is a highly ethical and moral organization who provides wonderful benefits for their employees, who has room for advancement and puts a higher priority on development of their associates. I'm excited about the opportunity for working for the industry leader. That's what I want. That's what I want. And it doesn't take a lot of time, not with the internet. So a couple things are going to happen. You're going to do some research on a company and go, I don't want it. No, it's just not, doesn't fit me, doesn't excite me, doesn't motivate me. Don't interview. Because then you're going to find those organizations like, oh my God, I didn't know that. That's awesome. I would love to work there. And guess what? That passion, that excitement, the enthusiasm, the smile will just come out naturally. And that's what I want. People have great BS detectors. They just do. People are great BS detectors. Not just HR, people. And they'll sniff it right out of you if you're like, I'm really excited, and you're not. You're not going to do it. I don't want you to do it. I want you to find a job that really excites you. You've heard that saying, you really love what you do, you never have to work a day in your life. There's a lot of truth in that. A lot of truth in that. And when you have that passion and it's bubbling out of you, and I want you to let it go. Let it go and let them see it. It'll go a long way. Now, you're also going to have to practice the eye contact. Some people are just naturally good at it. Think about a time that you've been at a social function and you meet somebody for just a second, and you turn around and like, I really like that person. What? How does that happen like that? It's the same thing. It's that likability factor. Or conversely, you meet your buddy's girlfriend and you're like, she's a bitch. You're reading and interpreting information so quickly. Really, 10 seconds and you've made that determination? Yeah. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. And it's probably accurate. The introduction is huge. Nail it. Smile. Enjoy the conversation. Be very cognizant of your tone. Great eye contact. And there's a lot of little things that we could talk about if we had more time. Eye contact is very important. The way you hold your posture. People have weird idiosyncrasies when they're in an interview. Let's move away from when we talk about a conversation. There are all kinds of things. There's the hand wringer. There's the chair rotator. It goes on and on. There's people that have just the nonverbals of just being guarded. These kind of things. So be aware of your nonverbals. Just be aware of it. And think of it as a conversation so you can just calm down. Worst case, you don't get the job. No one dies out of that thing. Enjoy it as an interview. You will be much more successful if you can go in there with that type of an attitude. This is a conversation. Not an interview, it's a conversation, and I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to enjoy telling them about myself. The two most common reasons that someone doesn't get hired: lacked passion and enthusiasm, failed to sell skills. I've written that countless times. Failed to sell skills. Most of us are humble beasts, and it's good. You know, you have the friend who's the bragger who's best at everything. But most of us are humble. And we have a hard time talking about ourselves and bragging on ourselves. Well, guess what? The interview's the time to do that. You really need to. You're going to think you're going way overboard. The person who's interviewing is just going to be like, oh, that's great. Awesome. Just like the smile. You know, I'll coach people and say, all right, let's do an interview. And I'm like, I told you to smile during the interview. I was smiling. Well, maybe twice, a little hint of a smile, but you're going to think you're smiling your ass off. But they're going to be reading passion, excitement. They're just excited to be here. I really can't think of a time, I guess you could, a little goofy in the interview, but you really have to go overboard for that to occur. That passionate smile. Bring on the next question because I am ready. I'm so excited. That's what I want. A slight lean forward. A lot of nonverbal cues. The nonverbals are a big deal. And I'm not going to get into every little bit of it, but good eye contact, warm tone, excitement, passion in your voice will go a long way. Be prepared to talk about yourself. 3 to 5 minutes. Very, very open, honest. Now, you can go too far, too. Right? I mean, they don't want to know that you just changed your son's dirty diaper, and you can get too. Don't go crazy on it. But give them a nice, warm introduction that they walk away with. I know a little bit more about that person, and I like them. That's what I want you to get to. Okay. Now let's transition from this introduction to the body of an interview. And you're probably thinking, if I were you, this is what I'd be thinking. Boy, I spent a lot of time on that introduction. I'm not going to spend as much time on the body and the ending. I'm not going to spend as much time because it's not as important. It's important. You can still screw up an interview in the body and in the ending. You can do it. You have to try. If you're already on fire and you've got this human connection, you really have to try to lose the interview in the body in the ending. And again, this really was foreign to me at the time. I was like, oh, no. Can't be that way. It is. It is that way. So let's talk about it. Remember, from a large organization perspective, the questions are sterile. Now, if you're interviewing with a small mom and pop type thing, you could get anything. Because they're not trained, they're not nearly as concerned about being sued. They may be like, hey, you pregnant, honey? Right? They may ask you anything. But from a large employee perspective, they're savvy. They're not going to make those kind of mistakes. They're not going to make them. So they can only get what you're willing to share. Now, they're going to ask you some questions, and we'll take it from a competency-based perspective. And I want you to understand, what does that mean? What competency-based? When you say that, what does that mean? Competency-based is a type of interview that a lot of large companies will utilize because it's so safe. It's safe because we have the question. If we don't deviate from the question. And it generally does not require additional digging of questions, which can get people from the company in trouble. So a question might be, tell me about a time in which you delivered outstanding customer service. Right? A lot of companies that you'll be looking at, State Farm included, put a priority on our providing exceptional customer service. And competency-based interviewing uses the theory that your past performance is the best predictor of what you're going to do in the future. Past, what you did in the past, I can then overlay what I would expect you to do in the future. That's the theory behind competency-based interviewing. Now, if you were to ask me, is that the best way to, from a company perspective, is that the best way to draw information out of people? No. It's not. It's the safest, very safe, not the best. There are much other different tactics that I think are much better, but they require much more skill. Multi-dimensional interviewing is where I could ask you a scenario, for example. And these scenarios then lead me to other little rabbit hole questions. Well, you can see, if it leads me as a company representative to rabbit hole questions, different questions, I'm suddenly exposing the company, because then I may say something that's illegal versus the scripted competency-based, if that makes sense. So a lot of large organizations stick with the competency-based model. Just the reality of it. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about this morning. How to answer a competency-based question. Again, past performance, best predictor of the future. Let's use that question. Hey, Mark, tell me about a time in which you exhibited outstanding customer service. This is how I'd answer that. Okay, I think I have an example for you. Well, while I'm going to UNC, I worked at Wendy's, and this was about 6 months ago. And as you know, Wendy's is open late, right? 2 a.m. And I was working the night shift, and it was probably 1 in the morning. And it was myself behind the register, and I had one cook who was behind me. And I could see some lights pulling into our parking lot, and I knew I was going to have a customer soon, and I had just finished mopping our tile floor. And I was smart. I had put the yellow cones, caution, wet floor, out. And I watched as this female came into our establishment, opened our front door, and took about 5 steps, and then she fell. And she fell very hard. And I ran out from my register, and I assisted her up, and I asked her, "Are you okay?" And she assured me she was. I could tell she was more embarrassed by slipping than truly hurt. So after making sure she was okay, I returned to my register, and she approached and she ordered. And while she was ordering, I was thinking to myself, "Wow, that's too bad." Here I have someone who's patronizing Wendy's, and she has this terrible experience as she walks in. So I made the decision to go ahead and comp her meal for that night. And I knew I'd have to tell my manager in the morning that I made that decision, and I was confident that he would be fine with it. So she came up and she ordered, and I told her, I'm so sorry. I'm glad you're okay, and I'm so sorry that you had that experience. It's on Wendy's tonight." And I saw she was taken back, and she humbly took her meal, and she walked out. And I told my manager the next day what had occurred, and he was fine with it. Well, about 2 weeks after that, my manager called me in and said, "Mark, do you recall the customer who slipped on the top floor, a couple weeks ago?" I said, "I sure did." And he said, "Well, she came back in, and she asked to speak to me, the manager." I said, "Wow." And she said she was so impressed with your compassion and with your decision to comp her meal. It really made her feel good. And she said she's a customer for life. And I wanted you to know that, my manager told me. And it made me feel great. Okay, I'm going to stop. What did I do with this question? The question was, "Mark, tell me a time you delivered outstanding customer service." 1, I took time to tell you a story. I took the time to tell you a story. And if I did it right, if I did it even close to right, you saw her. You saw her hair color. I didn't tell you what it was. You saw my register. You probably saw my paper hat. Because you ran to my story. And because I took the time to tell you a story, you realize how significant it was what I did, which is the second part of this. Story, what did you do? Story, what did you do? You know what I did. I helped her up. I made sure she was okay. I made the decision to comp a meal. Okay? The final part of the competency-based answer. There's only 3 parts. It's pretty simple. Story, what did you do? Results. Story, what did you do? Results. And my result, as you know, I have a customer for life. She was ecstatic with the customer service she received from me at Wendy's. Now, if you're missing any of those components, story, what did you do, results, you're going to get questions. You may get a couple of questions, and then they'll shut down because they're kayaking. For example, Mark, how did she fall? I didn't take enough time to tell the story. Because I didn't probably bother saying, well, I just mopped the tile floor, blah, blah, blah. I just may have started off like, well, I had a lady who fell, and I helped her out conquer the home. You know? So we did. It's not enough. You've got to take the time so that they can see what you did. You know, a lot of people go into these elaborate stories that are use of all kinds of acronyms. Well, when I was at the DPP, I went and saw the API guy, and he, right? And you're like, what the heck are you talking about? You need to take time to make sure they understand your story. Take time, tell the story, go into what you did, not what management directed you to do, not what you were told to do. What did you do? And then a lot of people forget this final piece, the results. And you'll get that question, well, whatever happened? You know, you kind of let me dangle in there. Really common for the results to be left off. Just super common. But if you take it from that scenario, story, what you did, results, you're going to nail it. You're going to nail it. And again, I didn't cure cancer by picking her up and conquer a meal, but I certainly answered their question. And hopefully they can say, overlay that and say, boy, he really is customer focused. Now, I'll get the question a lot of times, my goodness, Mark, I can't prepare. There's so many competencies out there. You know, there's leadership, there's communication, there's initiative, there's decision making. I mean, the list of competencies is very long. Well, let's look at my customer service example. If I got a question on decision making, I could use it. If I got a question on initiative, I could use it. What I want you to understand is you can't prepare for every competency. It's impossible. There's too many. My suggestion to you is you come prepared with what I call your 5 big hitters. Your 5 big hitters. And your 5 big hitters have a nice story. What did you do? And results. And it should house you have some kind of a business value. You know the kind of questions they're looking at. They want someone who takes initiative. They want someone a good communicator. They want someone who's customer service oriented. They want someone who has learning agility. So look at your experiences and say, all right, what do I have that demonstrates some of these competencies? And does it have a nice story? What did I do? Results. And it may be when you learned here at school. Well, I was responsible. I took the lead in a group of 5 to present on a finance matter. And blah, 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 to take the story. Our goal was to do. What I did was this. As a result of my efforts in leading this team, whatever it is. Again, it doesn't have to be super significant. But you have to understand from an HR perspective, we'll lose you pretty quickly unless you take the time to tell us the story. It's amazing. People just make this a leap of assumption in their head that we know what you're talking about. I have no idea half the time what someone's talking about. And if I don't know what they're talking about, it's really not that great of an answer to me. It's not that great because I really don't understand it. Does that make sense? Now, I could regale you with story after story of how people interview. Interviewing thousands give you a plentiful supply of stories. And I do have some just to entertain you more than anything else. think I told you when I was growing up, my dad was in the military. He was a Marine, and we did move all over the place. And Marines are an interesting group. You know, they're very proud of their Eagle, Globe, and Anchor logo. And I was going through resumes, and Eagle, Globe, and Anchor was on one of the resumes, and it caught my eye. So I pulled it out, and I said, I'm going to interview this particular person. And at the time, I was an assistant manager, and I didn't do a lot of the interviews myself. I had HR reps who would do most of the interviews, but I thought, I'm going to call this person in myself and interview him, and I did. He was a gunnery sergeant in the Marine Corps, and he was just out, and I was excited to meet him. Because I realized, you know, there's core values that many of the military bring. They bring, you know, this incredible discipline, this hard work, very reliable. So they have a lot of things that, from an employer perspective, is very attractive. So I bring in the gunny, and he's sitting across from me, and I start out, and right off the bat, I could smell smoke on him, which is I'm not very favorable on. But I'm still going to give him a shot. And he didn't have a very good introduction. And I'm trying to get over that. And I asked him that customer service question. Hey, Gunny, why don't you tell me about a time in which you developed or created a situation where you think you exhibited outstanding customer service? And this is what the Gunny told me. He says, well, Mark, right when I got out of the service, I worked at this dry cleaners. And he says, I was behind the counter, and I'm liking this to myself. I'm like, oh, he's telling me a story. I was behind the counter, and this customer approached, this is his words, and she was a bitch. And he says, I wanted to jump over that counter and stick my boot up her rear end. He didn't use rear end, however. He says, but I didn't. Well done, guy. Yeah, that was his answer to outstanding customer service. Okay. I'm going to transition now to the final part of this interview. We talked in length, very deliberately, about the interview. I hope that you understand the significance of that. I really do. I really want you to understand that you've already had the qualifications to do the job that you have to interview. You already have the qualifications, not on the table. It's about, do they like you? Can you make this human connection? It really is. I believe that from my entire heart. We talked relatively quickly about how to answer a competency-based question. And I want you to understand that. Because you can't create an answer for everything, but I want you to have 5 big ones in your back pocket that you can pull out that apply to the competency that they're asking. Remember, it's a what did you do in the past, predict the future. So it's not, well, generally no, that's philosophical. I want an example. Tell me about a time in which you did this, so that I can overlay that to assume what you're going to do in the future. Finally, I'm going to transition to what I call the dismount. And I call it a dismount, and you're going to remember this. Is one of the reasons I call it, because I want you to remember it. You know when it's time that this thing is wrapping up. This interview is wrapping up when you hear something like, well, I really enjoyed my time. Might be lying through my teeth. Might have kayaked my entire time. I really enjoyed my time. Thank you for coming in. Is there anything you want to leave me with? Or do you have any questions for me? Right? Something like that. That's your cue that this bad boy's wrapping up. It's wrapping up. And a lot of times, especially in a screening interview, I'd even say 80% of the time, I don't get anything. I go, oh, you know what, Mark, thank you so much. That's what I get. That's what I get. And there's nothing terrible with that. It's just a missed opportunity. So, this is the part you're going to remember. I want you to liken this wrapping up, this dismount, to a gymnastics routine. And I don't care what gymnastics it is. It could be uneven bars. Let's do the rings today. So we have the guy on the rings, right? They're tremendously strong. They're doing this iron cross, right? I don't know how to do it without ripping their shoulders out. But in a high level of competition, there's a whole series of judges from around the world. Let's say the Olympics, and they're like, oh, okay, strength skill, nice iron cross. And there's a release skill. They have to release the rings, and they do some flips, and they grab the rings again. Phenomenal. Release skill, check. Right? They go through this whole routine. And in a super high level of competition, for some reason, it always comes down to the dismount. Right? It's the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. They're on that thing for 4 minutes. And then it all comes down to this. Oh! He took a step! He took a step! Oh, it's a little humanity! Right? What? Okay, now let's take a step. Now he's out of the gold? Yeah? Yeah, it's over. The dismount in a high level of competition can be that differentiator. I want you to nail it. I want you to nail this dismount. And it really is only in a high level. When there's two people competing, both great introduction, nice answers, does that become the delineator, the differentiator? It's nowhere near as important as the intro. But it is important when you enter a high level and you're really in the money for this. You're the first, second place for one position. So let's talk. What do you do? Well, generally, does he have any questions for us? Anything you want to leave us with? Something like that. Don't ask a question that you could have gotten the answer to very easily outside of that interview. Just makes you look stupid. Like, what can I expect for the training? And that's a fair question if you couldn't have gotten the answer to it outside the interview. But if you could have easily got that answer, don't ask it. I would much rather you say something like, it's my understanding that the training for this position is 6 weeks long, 6 weeks in length, and it includes a trip to your corporate office for 2 weeks as well. Is there any other training that I can All right. Because with that question, you've shown me you've done your homework. You see the difference? You've already laid the foundation. Okay, you understand about this position, and you're kind of going to the next level. I'm okay with that question. But don't ask a question that just looks canned. It just hurts you more than helps you. I'm not saying don't ask a question. I'm just saying be very strategic with your question. I'd rather you tell me in your question you have a lot of information, and then ask a question behind that. It's a slight difference, but it's significant. It's significant. I want you to have done your homework, because how can you really want me unless you already know about me as an organization? And if you don't have a question, it's okay too to say, you know what, Mark? Thank you for the opportunity to ask you a question. I don't have a question because I've really done a lot of research about this position. I have a few friends who work at your organization who I've talked to in length about it. They love their job. I'm convinced I have a solid understanding of the skill sets necessary and of your culture. So I don't have any questions, but there are some things I want to leave you with. And this is where your dismount begins. And it's very customized. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. I'll give you an example of one, but I'm not going to tell you how to do it. But don't miss the opportunity. I'd love to hear something like, you know what, I'm very familiar with your organization. I went very excited about the opportunity to work here. I'm confident that my skill sets meet or exceed the requirements for this job. Those being excellent communication skills, customer orientation, teamwork, the ability to make decisions and problem solve. Mark, thank you for the opportunity I had today to interview. I hope my passion and excitement came through, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Something like that. Again, I'm not going to tell you how to do it, but I want you to put a bow on this thing. This is your opportunity to kind of wrap it up. Now, what I hear a lot of times is, again, I hope you could tell that I'm super excited for the opportunity to work at this organization. No eye contact. Tone tells me they're not excited. It doesn't sell it. You've got to deliver it as a package. You've got to be excited about it. You've got to tell them you're excited, and it has to match it. And that is a home run when you do that. It doesn't happen very often. You would think, oh my God, that's just common sense, Mark. Yeah, you would think. It isn't. So many people just can't wait to get out of that room. They're just like, nope, goodbye, thank you. Looking forward to hearing from you. And they just miss that opportunity to just sell themselves that one last time. It is nice when you understand the skill sets that are required for the position and that you weave them in there. You heard me do it with customer service, decision-making, teamwork. Those are all just beautiful buzzwords that I'm really attached to. Because I feel like, all right, you understand what's required, and your passion and enthusiasm will get you through anything. You deliver that passion and enthusiasm, I can put you anywhere. Because you won't fail. You won't fail. And guess what? As an HR person, I'm going to have a quality hire that I'm proud to give up to management. Because they're going to be like, holy mackerel, Mark just delivers these outstanding candidates. And out of Mark's last 10 hires, 9 are still here 2 years later. Whew. He's getting the right person for the job, and it's phenomenal. That's what I want. That's the HR's perspective. You need to understand that when you go in. That's what they're looking for. I have taken up my time today. I want you to know I really do appreciate your attentiveness today. I wish you the best of luck in your job hunt. Listen to what I said today. Apply it, and I am convinced you will be highly successful in those interviews, and you will make it much less stressful for yourself if you can get it to a conversation versus an interview. Thank you for your time.
Been wonderful. I've seen you before, and it's always very interesting.
Thank you very much.
I'm a little nervous. Delta Sigma Pi and they have worked this together, and we would like to give you a gift for attending by and sharing your thoughts with us. It was wonderful.
Very nice. Thank you very much.